David, thank you for joining us here this afternoon. I'm very pleased to meet you.
Gary, thank you for having me today.
You know, often I know my guests on the podcast, but I didn't know you, and I got a chance to ask you just briefly who you are. But why don't you just tell us who you are and tell us a bit of your story, because this is just going to captivate everybody to hear that story.
Well, thank you very much. For 30 plus years, I was a salesperson, a sales executive for some major technology companies. And then in 2009, that sort of shifted when I went through a plane crash called the Miracle on the Hudson. I was the last passenger off the plane. I was on company business. And you know, it definitely changed the direction of my life, but that's when the transformation of what I was going to do, because what really happened is when I came back, my company, my manager just asked me to go back to work the next day and fly to Michigan, and I realized that I was under control of a company and I wasn't really fulfilling my destiny. And I knew after the Miracle on the Hudson, I had a different focus, a different mission, and that set me on the course of where I was going to go. So that's what I've been doing since. Speaking. I've written 3 books. I published my own magazine. I consult with people. I do private coaching and conduct workshops. I'm very blessed to do that.
You know, I had shivers going through my body as you were talking about that, and because I did watch the movie. I did do a little flying when I was younger, and just to understand the magnitude of that. So, what was going and to be asked to go right back to work afterwards and to get back into a plane? I mean, there must have been PTSD or whatever after that event like that.
Yeah, it's interesting because people have asked me that, and I've had psychologists ask me that. And what happened is I may have had some, but a couple years later, there was an article I was asked to participate in. It was for AARP magazine. Now, I was like, what can I contribute to them? This is for older folks. They probably know a lot more, have more wisdom, but the question they wanted to talk to me is how many of the passengers and even some of the crew had PTSD, but I had something called PTGS.
Okay.
Post-traumatic growth. What did I do differently?
Ah, awesome.
And so I shared the strategy on what I did differently to grow, which turned into a TED Talk, which went viral, about how to grow out of a traumatic life experience, which set me in a different direction.
Well, wow, that's amazing, and I can see that. And so what was your thought process like? Because you went from being in the corporate world and, as you said, went from somebody else controlling your life. And the 2 things that we appreciate here at Strategic Coach about entrepreneurs, that they control of their time and control of their income. And you chose to have that post-traumatic growth. What went through your mind? How did you feel? Did you feel because you'd survived and that you could get through anything? What was it that?
I definitely had more of a certainty mindset that, if I can accomplish that, I can accomplish anything. Plus I was a top salesperson. So I knew one thing. I could sell. I could drive revenue, right? So, but I had the biggest sale I ever had was with my wife, because she loved the certainty of a corporate position, right? So that was actually my biggest sale. But one thing I learned, Gary, is when I started on my own, I could definitely drive revenue. I didn't have a team, it was just me. What I wasn't good at, it was all the other things. The payables, receivables, the back end. And I got caught. I have to admit, I got caught because I wasn't collecting. I was just trying to be the sales guy, right? In a entrepreneur, and I figured out very quick what we find out what Dan Sullivan teaches, right?
Yeah.
I got to find some who's for my house.
Right.
And that's when the light bulb went off. And then my mentor is out of Atlanta. He's been in strategic coach for over 20 years. He was on me. He said, you got to do this. You got to do this. I'm like, do I really want to make the investment? Do I really need that? And then right after COVID, he and I spoke. I said, you know what? I'm going to do it. And I want to see what this thing's all about, because I was reading the books, and that sort of set me on a different pathway.
So what did it do? I mean, it's really important, because I've been involved in coach for 3 decades now, and hard to think, but at that length of time. And so I don't know anything else other than that, but I still remember back a little bit about that. And so what frustrations did you go through that said, I can't do this on my own anymore? And because you still wanted to grow.
Yep.
Yeah, because you still had that you still are on a growth track, and you could see it because you could sell, but something was holding you back.
Yeah, what was holding me back is it was a fear of, if I add people, I'm not responsible for people. I can drive revenue. Do I get the right people? If I don't have, and I made some poor choices. And it was interesting, Gary, because what I realized, I didn't realize it then until my mentor basically came to me and said, it's your fault. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, you had great people, you had them in the wrong places. And they were not taking me down, but I wasn't growing. I was driving revenue, but it's only one thing. You can have 150,000 in revenue, but if no one's watching the back end, right? And I was doing all the sales, so I didn't have time. So they talk about the freedom of time. That's what actually drove me to coach. Freedom of money was a nice thing. Mm-hmm. Freedom of relationships, very nice, right? That's good, but it was the time. And I knew that I had to figure a different strategy out. And that was the one that drove me.
See, you came in with a really unique situation, is that you knew what you were already good at. Yep. The problem is you didn't know what you weren't good at.
Right. Yep.
And because you knew you could sell, you'd proven that in your career, your corporate career, but you didn't have to worry about anything else because all that whole infrastructure was done for you. Was that a real shock for you to kind of go, holy crap, I now have to do all these things?
I worked with financial executives and HR executives all these years, right? So it's like, and I talked about financial systems and all these things, supply chain. I'm good at that stuff, right? And then I get into it. I'm like, I don't have a system. I'm waiting for people to pay me. I'm not taking deposits. I'm like, what's wrong with this, right? What did I not pick up? And all of a sudden, I had a situation that happened where there were two organizations that promised to pay me the day of, and it took them 6 months, and I had to go into savings to pay for everything. And all of a sudden I realized I'm not good at this.
That might have been quite a sell to your wife too that time.
She was really not that pleased. My wife really likes revenue, and she likes to be able to handle that. So, but I've been focused. I know I don't give up. I don't give up.
Well, the thing that was also good is you were on a mission.
Right.
Okay? You'd understood what the sales were, you'd been through the miracle on the Hudson, and that gave you just a renewed energy and strength. I'm kind of paraphrasing for you. So you were on a mission to help other people through this. And so maybe help me articulate, what was that mission? And what is that mission still? I presume it's the same.
Yeah, the mission has definitely morphed. Initially, the mission was just to impact somebody every day. And I said that in an interview on the 5-year anniversary, but as I started really getting into it, and some of the coaches started bringing it out because people ask, well, the first year coach, I was sort of in a fog. I was trying to figure this thing out, right? But it started coming to me the first year, what the mission really was. And it harkened back to 1984, when my first mentor. And fast forward, he mentored me. He owned over 80 movie theaters and restaurants through the Carolinas. He was an entrepreneur. His nickname in Charlotte was the Sam Walton of Charlotte.
Right.
So he took me under his wing, right? But fast forward to 1997, right before he passed away, he called me to his office. He said, I want to give you a couple things. Number one, he said, I want to let you know that I've got lung cancer. Mm-hmm. Now, he smoked unfiltered Camel since the 20s. So, unsettling, but not a shock. Right. But then what happened, Gary, this is the one that woke me up. This is where I figured out my mission. He went over he had a big one of these old 20s roller desks, a beautiful desk, pulled these crumpled pieces of paper out, sat right next to me right here, put them on my lap. I said, what is this? He goes, these were the handwritten notes I wrote in 1929 on how I was going to be successful. I want to give this to you, but you have to promise me one thing. I said, what? Do not let it die with you.
Awesome.
He passed away in September. I didn't do anything with those notes for a while until I wrote my first book, Moments Matter. And I said, you know what? First, I had gold in my hands, but worse off, this is where the mission came in. I didn't fulfill a promise, right?
Yes.
I did fulfill the promise. This is my mission. I'm fulfilling that promise. And one of the last things I talk about in every talk, I don't care what kind of talk, is if you're a leader in a company, you're expected to mentor somebody, to leave with somebody else.
Absolutely.
And that's my mission. So so now I've changed my strategy based on Coach. I actually changed my strategy. Is now I'm giving all my information up front. I'm giving them the best I got. And if I do coaching and I do workshops, but if they want to come to me for more, I'm here. But you're going to get the best of me because I'm on this mission to make sure it doesn't die with me.
Well, you know what? And what you've learned that also takes a long time for entrepreneurs to learn is that you can give away what you want, but until somebody's willing to take it in themselves and, quotes, pay for it, whatever their cost is, even if it's a personal cost and that's money, it doesn't mean anything.
Right.
And I'm presume you probably saw that. A lot of people would want to listen to you and everything else, but didn't necessarily want to do anything about it.
You know, it's interesting you say that because for over 10 years, I was head of security for a guy named Tony Robbins. And I would debrief with Tony. I travel with him, so you get to know a lot of things about people when you travel with him.
Yeah, I met Tony a couple times.
And one of the things he shared with me years ago And he said, you know, one of the things that I'm really challenged by when he does all these events, they're high power like we're doing here, right? High powered, right? He goes, they're all high powered and they go home, they don't just take any action. He said, I want people to do what I do, right?
Yep.
And he said, I want people to take action and do what I do. So that's what one of the missions likewise is. Take it massive action. You got to do something with what you learn. Just don't let it sit, because I did that with those notes for, you know, a few years. You know?
Yeah, but until those notes weren't his, but yours,
Right.
it didn't mean as much to you.
Well, my mentor told me something, and once again, it woke me up. That's why everybody needs a mentor. He said something. His name's Don. His name's Don Barton. Don has been in the program for a while.
Okay.
He said, you know what? Because I shared these notes with him. And I said, I feel like an idiot. She goes, God doesn't give you the lesson until you're ready. You weren't ready for him. Now you are. Time to execute.
Yeah.
And that was the trigger that said, okay, now metal to the pedal time.
Well, you know, and I'm glad you brought that up, because we talk about purpose a lot at Strategic Coach, but as I said, I've been coaching for 28 years now, and it's only been in the last 5 years that I was able to really articulate to my satisfaction my purpose. And my purpose, maybe not too dissimilar from yours, is helping people and organizations grow. And of course, I got the opportunity to coach, but I coached for a long time before I really ingrained that into me as purpose. And so I think it's important to have one. I think it's important for entrepreneurs, but I don't want them to feel too frustrated they don't have it clear right away.
Yeah, it took, like I said, mine's sort of morphed, right? It's grown, and when you get more, learn what I learned, distinctions. And that's what, thing about Dan Sullivan is this. You know, there's a lot of these things I've heard, but it's the distinctions that I'm now picking up on, that I can take action on the distinctions, which raises that level.
So you having made the transition and successfully and going through the frustrations that all of us as entrepreneurs do and coming out the other side, how do you see the future of entrepreneurism? I mean, we got all this technology and the things going on, but you're very personal in what you do. So how do you see the world of entrepreneurism unfolding here?
Yeah, I think, you know, this is the pathway that I think is going to get a lot of people, not personally, but also this economy out of the challenges we're in. It's going to take people self-starting and taking ownership, and I think that's number one. But number two, I think, you know, one of the big lessons I also learned is if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you better live in the game. And there are many times I would transition to the gap, right? And my mentor, once again, I go this back, because my second book's called From Turmoil to Triumph.
Wow.
And it's about these lessons my mentor left me. And what transpired out of that book is this. I wrote every word of that book, Gary. And I wrote it. And what I realized after writing the book is my mother taught me the same things. I didn't listen. You need somebody from the outside, give you a different perspective. A mentor will do that. And on the cover of Mark, Tony did a nice quote from me. He goes, he wouldn't be Tony Robbins without Jim Rohn. Everybody needs a mentor. So when I look at Coach is a group of mentors. My coach is Teresa Easler.
Absolutely.
I look at her as a mentor. I have now multiple mentors who can give me distinctions to help me help other people achieve my mission and purpose.
Well, you know, it's interesting. It took me a while to appreciate that my father was one of my mentors, and because he was like 40 years older than I was. He was an entrepreneur at a time when being an entrepreneur meant you couldn't hold a job, and so it didn't always resonate with me. But he said a lot of things, and when I first came to coach and to be a coach, and I went out and had dinner with him the night after, he was so proud of me. He was so proud and I didn't see it, but he could see it from what he had been through, the American Management Association, other things he'd done, and we might have been able to work together later in life, but he was really clearly a mentor. And of course, Dan Sullivan over the last 30 years has been a big one to me too.
They come and go. When people say, well, these kids come to me sometimes, well, how'd you get it? Right? How'd you do this? And I said, well, fortunately, I put myself in proximity. And that was one of the biggest lessons I teach. This is one of the first things I teach is proximity is power, right? Proximity is power, because my first mentor came into my restaurant when I was a second assistant restaurant manager. I had proximity every day.
I'm trying to figure out all these things you've done in your life. This is
I was at second assistant restaurant at Howard Johnson, working second, third shift, and my mentor Bill would come in every night for coffee and ice cream, right?
Yeah.
That's how I got, so he was in proximity. Well, he said, well, how'd you get with Tony Robbins? I was in proximity, because what happened was, I was actually serving at one of his events. I was just volunteering. I paid my own dime just to be around the energy, right?
Right.
But it was one night, and we were in Maui, Hawaii, and I was one of the guys at midnight putting down brochures on the seats, right? and his former wife was in a corner talking to two gentlemen, and I felt that she looked uncomfortable. But I went up to Mrs. Robbins. Mr. Robbins needs you in the back. And she said, thank you, and I escorted her back. She said, you handled that very well.
Oh, wow.
I said, well, thank you very much. She goes, would you like to be on security team? I said, it's a lot better than putting down brochures. Thank you very much, right? So she put me in the green room. All I did is sit in the green room for a couple months, right? Just sit there. But I gained trust and proximity with Tony.
Yeah.
And he got trust with me. So it comes down to trust, right? Came down to trust. So I tell young people, anybody will mentor you. You have to ask, and you got to put yourself in proximity.
You know, it's interesting, bring up mentor, and I've done a lot of work in China, and I still do, and have an office over there. But one of the people I consider mentor was the head of the business, the rubber business that I was involved in and still in. And I remember going through a really critical time. A couple of my customers had gone around me, and so I thought, are these people all trustworthy? But I dealt with them for a few years. And I remember going into the meeting telling them, okay, bullish, this is how I'm going to make it. You want to, not quite the same post-traumatic growth, but I'd gone through a downturn that I hadn't anticipated. I came in, and he said, and it all had to be translated for me, Mr. Dong, I still remember, he said, Gary, if you believe in yourself, we believe in you. And that's
Stayed with you.
Yeah, that was 2006. So almost 20 years ago.
I can pull it off, and we know you can pull it off, so we know.
Yeah, so he said, we're with you, and I'm still friends with the people that are there today, and one of the young guys who I just spoke to, who I've worked with for 27 years, said, Gary, you changed my life. It just means so much.
That's the biggest compliment you can have.
And I also had to tell him he changed my life too, so all the things were working like that too.
Yep.
Cool. So what's next for you? What do you see? Dave, you got 3 books, and you still do all your speaking. You got your organization kind of settled down now?
We're growing the organization. We're going to be hiring our next person, and one of the things that I do now is I use the Colby before instead of after. That was a big
good. I
big
just
learning
interviewed
for me.
David Colby, so perfect.
That was a big learning for me. But we're going to be rolling out this workshop, and it's and the reason it was called this workshop's going to be focused on all the best of me. And the reason why is because what I realized out of this whole thing is if I give the best up front, and like you said, if they want more, they can have access. But I want to give people the opportunity to hear these things. I mean, I've been able to discern all these things from all these people. And I've been in proximity of a lot of people that have distinctions. And I was telling today on my talk today, it's I was doing who for your how instead of even when I didn't know I was doing it, right? All of a sudden, all he said is just put a definition for me. It's like, you know what? That's the key.
Yeah, it is.
And so, we're going to grow our company. We're going to add our workshop. We're going to kick that off in about 2 weeks, and then we're going to go metal to the pedal. We're going to hire another salesperson, right? And we're going.
That'll be interesting for you, for the person who's done all the sales.
Well, I talked to the Colby people here. We're going to do a right fit for this one, right?
I think that's a good idea.
And the reason why is because I have a different vision for this sales position. And what it is this. I want that person not only to go out and market the workshop, that's key, but I want that person to learn all the stuff that I know so that person can take over me.
And you know what? I've found I'm at best when somebody else sells for me.
Right.
And so even though clearly I've had to sell over time, but when someone else sells for you, then they can sell you better than we can sell ourselves.
Yep.
And that's really important.
So that's going to be a new revelation, but yeah, I want to pass the baton to somebody else to teach this stuff so I can focus on serving at a higher level.
Good. Have you got a name for what that workshop's going to be?
Yeah, it's called Limitless 100 Days to Your Outcome. And that 100 days came from me going back in the Hudson River and swimming with the Navy SEALs, and I had swam for 40 years. In 100 days, I went from barely swimming 25 yards to 3.1 miles. And today, for the first time in public, I do this for my private clients, I share this strategy. And I've used the strategy in sales and for what we do. And I think people are blown away by the strategy because it's simple, but I went from 0 to 3.1 miles with the elite of the elite in 100 days.
Wow.
You can do anything in 100 days.
Awesome. Don't lose it from terror to triumph either. I think there's a...
Turmoil to triumph.
Yeah, turmoil. I think the turmoil to triumph. I think that's really cool thought. A lot of people can resonate with that too.
Yep.
Yeah, to bring that through.
Thank you.
So, any thoughts you'd like to leave with as we wrap up this?
I'm very honored and humbled to be here. It's I was going to come, but being able to have the opportunity to meet you and have some understanding about you and what I'm doing here, I just want people to know that this year is going to be about total uncertainty. I'm in the United States. I tell people what COVID exposes It wasn't just about COVID. It was about police. It was about justice. It was about that stupid election that kept going on, and it stacked on people. And people didn't understand the strategy, how to get out of it. This year, we're going to have a lot of uncertainty. So my goal right now is to show people how to embrace it and ignite an opportunity out of that, which will transform your life.
Yeah.
That is where our mission is this year.
Awesome, and I totally agree with you, because I just published a book, and it's called Nimble Future. And it's basically called Reinterpret Your Past, Protect Your Present, and Engage in Your Future, which is only bring forward from the past the things that are going to be useful for what's going forward.
Right.
Leave those things behind. And what filters do you need to have because of all the uncertainty that's out there, and to create as much certainty around you so people don't move forward in uncertainty.
Right.
They need to have some world that's a little more settled.
Yep. Thank you.
Well, Dave, thank you so much. I apologize for not having recognized the beginning, but I'm really delighted we had this opportunity to hear your story, and all the best with your future.
Thank you, Gary. I'm honored to be here with you. It's nice to meet you finally.
And our paths will cross again.
We will do it.
Thank you.